What's up? I think this is working. Let's see. Hey, everybody. Is it working? Yeah. Yes, all right. I think it's just an alone one, Kendall. It's just me and you. Where is Kristen? She's just watching. And commenting. And Aaron too. All right, looks like some people are kind of coming on here. So this is going to be a Facebook Live where I think it's just me talking to you, which is really weird and feels awkward. So we're kind of just going to be taking some questions through here. I know, I wish I was talking with Kristen and Aaron too, but they basically gave me the keys to the Ferrari of their Facebook page. And so after this, be on the lookout for a whole lot of little tweaks and changes on the Sip Northwest Facebook page. So yeah, this is going to be mostly Q&A. I know they want us to talk about hops and hazy beers and stuff. I'm drinking a beer with very little hops and no haze right now. So it's a collab beer we brewed with our friends at Outer Range in Frisco, Colorado. That's a Belgian style stout. So not a very exciting style for most people. But those kind of beer lovers and stout lovers definitely appreciate a nice Belgian beer. So, and this is one of them. Not a lot of Belgian stouts out in the wild. Yeah, so feel free to kind of shoot up some comments on the screen. I'll get around to it. It's kind of weird to just talk into my dresser right now. Here's literally I'm literally talking into my dresser right now as far as my setup goes. That's how weird this is. Aaron James says, how did you get into beer? Kendall, have you played with any new cool hops lately, stuff we aren't familiar with? Yes, as far as like hops playing around with, I mean, I think it's still a very long process for new hop varieties to kind of like get named and get out into the open. So right now we're playing around with a lot of numbered hops. We're a member of a small trade organization called the Hop Quality Group. That's about 50 breweries all over the country, that one of which is Grower Relations, is kind of like their big mission, but also some of our dues goes to funding Oregon State's hop breeding program. So we have an upwards of like 120 different new hop varieties at a given stage in development. Right now, about 30 of those, we've kind of narrowed it down. So we're playing around with a lot of these like fruit-forward hop varieties. People on this quality group, have a lot of science background. They are brewers that are much bigger than us, have a lot like funding they contribute to it. So brewers like Bell's in New Belgium and Sierra Nevada, they have, actual scientists on staff that are kind of like helping us go through it. So we're finally getting a little bit of those hop varieties to play around with. And we just got a few 100 pounds of 3 new hop varieties. So we're going to be playing around with these numbers, seeing if there's kind of any diamonds in the rough. As far as these varieties, they're all set up to be public varieties eventually. So things like Cashmere and Triumph, those hops that were kind of like newish to market as far as public variety goes. Like that's kind of where we're hoping these hops go. It's a really cool place to kind of be on the ground floor with these things. So those are the cool varieties we're playing around with. There are these numbers. We've got a pale ale we're brewing next week that's going to be brewed with one of these numbers, and we'll kind of just see where that goes. Hi, Kaylee Betts. Yes, she used to drink at Cloudburst all the time, and now you've moved away somewhere. Melissa loves the look of our new cans, so I guess we'll talk a little bit about our cans. You know, we never wanted to put our beer in cans. It was never in the business plan or business model. But these times, you know, you really kind of have to quickly adapt. So part of putting beer in our cans was, as exciting as it was from the drinker standpoint, it was exciting from a labor standpoint on our end. You know, we had just spent 2 weeks filling on average 2,000 crowlers a week, which is pretty much filling crowlers for 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, with me coming in for a few hours on a Sunday, and that was not sustainable. And so cans really kind of helps us along with that, helps us moving beer. I mean, even right now we're still down probably 60% as far as production goes, since 75% of our total production went to wholesale kegs. So we're kind of just trying to claw our way back up, and cans are helping us do that. Why do you hate hazy IPAs, Melissa Ricecar? I don't know. Hazy IPAs have a lot of elements to it. And yeah, here's another good question. Why do I think what is the most important part of hazy IPAs? Dry hops, malt, boiled, all these things. So here's what hazy IPAs, why some people don't like them. There's lots of reasons. So I guess what makes a hazy IPA, and that's a very generic term. So I personally don't like the term hazy IPA to begin with, because right now we're just talking about appearance, and there's many more facets to a beer than just what it looks like. So I'm not a big fan of this term hazy IPA. I think Manny down at Georgetown can tell you he's been making a hazy pale since Georgetown opened 15 years ago. That was a hazy Manny's is a hazy pale. So does it really kind of fit the guidelines of what a hazy beer is today? Not really, but I think kind of getting back to that question, hazy IPAs tend to finish, sweeter. There are more adjuncts in there, so there's more residual sugars, there's more unfermentable sugars in there, and other types of grains that contribute to, more body, thicker mouthfeel. Kind of creamy and smooth. They tend to not have a lot of bitterness to them, and then they also tend to have a lot of fruit flavors, whether that's hop-derived fruit flavors or fermentation-derived fruit flavors like esters. And so, so CJ Powell just says, do you have a yeast strain you love the most? So I guess kind of along the lines of these hazy IPA recipes, what do I think makes one, important? I definitely think adjuncts and yeast kind of are the two most important things to a hazy IPA, and then late addition hops. So when you're talking about yeast strain, there's certainly these like Juice and London 3 strains that are typically used in hazy IPAs that tend to not be super attenuative when they ferment out. So they're going to finish, with some more residual sugar. So they're going to be sweeter, and they're going to produce these really fruity, fruit-forward esters and higher alcohols. We don't use a hazy yeast strain per se. We have a house yeast strain that we use in probably 90% of all the ales we make is our house strain. So our house strain is publicly available via Imperial Yeast down in Portland. And it used to be Elysian's house yeast strain, and they started banking that yeast strain at Anheuser-Busch. We don't have access to that yeast bank anymore. we figured out a way to get that yeast again, and we found a yeast bank that was willing to work with us to clean it up, propagate it. And so our yeast strain, we got to name it. So it's called Corporate Ale Yeast. And I believe a year or two ago, Imperial Yeast made it available to home brewers as a seasonal yeast kit. So that's what we're using. And it's kind of this like Anglo-American English yeast strain that is pretty neutral. Some more esters kind of come out in darker beers we found. So it's kind of more distinctly American in dark beers, which is why if we were to brew a stout, it'd be kind of an American style stout. And so kind of that's where we're going with that yeast question. What is adjunct? Adjunct is basically anything that's not, that's not hops, malt, water, or yeast. So an adjunct, can be something on the mash side that's just not malted barley. So oats, wheat, rye, spelt. Those are adjuncts. Adjuncts could be something that's added post-fermentation. So fruit can be added during fermentation or post-fermentation, but fruit or chocolate or coffee, those are all types of adjuncts. So when we talk about adjuncts, we're really kind of just talking about non-typical beer ingredients. So yeah, that's kind of where this conversation will kind of seem a bit schizophrenic, I feel like, as we devolve into different questions. I'm going to try to kind of loop your questions into cohesive thought, I hope, as I can kind of put it. Aaron James is drinking, Happy Little Clouds right now, which is our bastardized German-style pils. A lot of people kind of ask us, why is this bastardized, and why do you, what type of style is it, and things like that. As far as the Happy Little Clouds goes, it's bastardized because we're using American and English hops in it. So it's the recipe is basically starts off as a traditional German Pilsner. It's all Weyermann Pilsner malt, a little bit of carafoam. It's Chuckanut's yeast strain that we drive up and get their pitch every once in a while. And then we started it off hopping it as far as the rate goes at a German-style Pilsner with Magnum, and then we use Saaz, another noble hop. But then we start to kind of twist it around, and so the current batch has New Zealand Cascade in it, which is really kind of has a very pleasant citrusy element, but it's still earthy undertones. So it's kind of got these like lime highlights, but still kind of earthy, grassy undertones to them, which I think makes a fantastic lager hop. And then there's some Mosaic and Happy Little Clouds as well, which is kind of just to brighten up a little bit more of those like generic fruit notes. So it's kind of like imperceptible Mosaic amounts we put in there, but it just to kind of like fruited it up a little bit. Any specific adjuncts you feel are the most important to hazies? I would say like oats or wheat, anything like high protein in the mash. I think those are the most important adjuncts to hazy IPAs. Is kind of more high protein types of grains that you're adding to the mash. Those to me are the most important to hazies. They contribute, a lot of that mouthfeel, and they also, that higher protein content should result in a hazy appearance kind of down the road. Someone's having a hazelnut cappuccino stout right now. Sounds kind of like Darkenflocks. Matt Edwards how's the new tap room coming? Hey, Matt Edwards from Georgetown Brewing fame. Our new tap room, it's on hold with all this construction being deemed non-essential. So we were planning to open it by the end of May before all this happened. And hopefully, as soon as construction resumes, we'll be ready to kind of hit the ground running and get it open at some point in the summertime so that we can kind of still have some time to enjoy the outside beer garden, even if it's still socially distanced or so. I feel like at this point, with how we open things back up, it's going to be probably somewhere along a 50% occupancy, to kind of start out at your establishment. And, Cloudburst's current tasting room has always been really packed, and it would also be kind of irresponsible to have it be that packed when we open back up. So that's kind of one of the things that we're currently thinking about is if we do get to open our tasting room back up, this one and then also the one in Ballard, now we're starting to think about how to responsibly do that with people drinking inside our space, and still being, appropriately distanced. And that's just a thing that I think a lot of us are all going to have to deal with and kind of figure out. Fernando Ruiz, you drove so far for our beer. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on out and trying our beer. Where's the new tap room? The new tap room is in Ballard, on Shoal Avenue, almost to 24th. So we're kind of in more old Ballard than like the brewery district. We didn't want to look at any spaces on 15th or east of 15th because we didn't want to step on our friends' toes. We have some great friends and some great breweries, all around 15th and 14th in Ballard, and we didn't really want to encroach on their turf. And so we actually weren't even like looking for a second tasting room in Ballard, but that's the building. There's only so many old, crusty, affordable buildings in Seattle city limits that still has some density, some people that will be living there and walking by there, and that's kind of how we landed on Ballard. But luckily, we're kind of closer to the main strip in Ballard. We're right behind the Sunset Tavern, where great tap list and a great small music venue over there. What's your favorite dark beer that I have ever made? Dr. Rachel loves Old Razzie Putin. My favorite dark beer that I've ever made, that's really a great question. I think there's lots of dark beers that I have loved making. I mean, we've never made a Belgian style stout at our building, but this is something that I think we're gonna revisit soon. I'd have to say, like, we made this weird we call it a Vermont style porter like 3 years ago. Which was kind of the precursor to the Black IPA or the CDA that we named in honor of Greg Noonan, a formative beer writer from New England. And I think that's still my favorite dark beer we've ever made, although it was probably the least popular dark beer we've ever made. Mark Krukar, what's up, Mark? He says, how are you deciding what to brew right now? Just going off the previous schedule, but more slowly? That's a great question, Mark. And it's really a challenge, to be honest with you. So yeah, we're probably operating at 60% capacity when we've always operated at fully 100%. Right now, our brew schedule is pretty much dictated by the mobile canning line schedule that we have coming in to put our beer in cans. So we have a canning run scheduled in early May. We have one in early June. We have one in late June. We have one next week too, a super small one next week. But the rest of them are these big canning runs, and it's not ideal. It's honestly a little frustrating to have to plan your schedule around something that's out of your control. So when the pandemic first hit, we had every single tank filled with beer, and then our first thought was how do we manage to move as much beer as possible in a new way without dumping beer. And we did end up having to dump probably somewhere close to 10 to 15 barrels of beer just because we weren't going to be able to move it as fast as I personally wanted it to move. A 2-month IPA is fine for a lot of people all over the country, especially in package. A 2-month IPA for us is considered, a dinosaur at this point. So we've basically kind of toned down our production schedule to fit when the canning line is coming in, and then what small batches we think we can sell enough wholesale and crowlers to kind of get us through. So that's kind of how we're deciding our production schedule. So we are still brewing every week. It's just sometimes it's a single batch, sometimes it's a double batch, sometimes it's both. But in the past, we used to brew every week, always a double batch, always a single batch, sometimes more. So that's kind of where we're at now. And I think that once we kind of figure out our scheduling, variable that'll allow us to kind of increase production again. Dumping beer, I know. Dumping beer is sad, but it's kind of one of those things that it comes with the territory. Dumping good beer is what's really sad, and that was great beer. That just was when you go from typically producing 60 barrels of an IPA recipe, so 2 30-barrel batches back to back, and then start from scratch. Usually that's great for how we are set up as far as our wholesale and tasting room go. When you do that and you just go back down to tasting room, which kind of sold 25% of our total production, now that's a lot of one type of beer to get through. And as we produce new beers, it's kind of creating this new monster of, all right, I had that beer already. Why is that beer still here? Is that beer any good? And even if that beer is 1 month old and it still tastes fantastic, it's kind of the beast that we have created. And that's kind of why we had to just, start from scratch, put some excess beer down the drain that was tasting great, and now kind of have a new strategy going forward. Man, you guys are also sad about this. It is sad when you dump beer, but it's just beer. It's not like we had to dump an employee down the drain or anything. We're still alive. Everyone's still working, still employed. Someone from Connecticut's in the house. That's where I grew up, and that's where my first head brewing job was. So shout out to Connecticut. Matt Edwards wants to know what happened to all the World Beer Cup sample bottles. I think that's the biggest conspiracy going on here right now. Is the Brewers Association planned this pandemic so that they could then hoard all of the best beer from every brewery, and they could kind of just coast out and not have to do any work, drink all this fantastic competition beer, and just kind of laugh at us. That's exactly where all the World Beer Cup beers went. Miss Kristen, Boss Lady Kristen, wants me to talk about the Fresh Hop Festival and freshies in general. So I don't even know if the Fresh Hop Festival is gonna go on. Who knows by then? And certainly, are any beer festivals going to be able to operate at the capacity that they were? I think it's pretty much a given. Oktoberfest is canceled. I can't imagine GABF, the festival portion of it, going on. I think the competition will still happen with GABF. I saw an email earlier in the week to GABF judges about what they would look for if they were to still judge that beer. So that's pretty cool. I hope that we can still enter beer and have that judged, and maybe do a digital, a virtual kind of award ceremony. But Fresh Hop Festival, the nice thing, at least with wet hop beers, are that's a pretty socially distanced process. We go to the farm early in the morning. We're really, talking to a farmer or two, grabbing those hops, getting back in the van, driving back, making beer. I think the fresh hop season will totally go on. At this point, we'll just be trying to one up ourselves from last year and maybe make a full dozen batches of fresh hop beers, just because we can, and it's ridiculous, and we should. So I don't know about Fresh Hop Festival, but I do think Fresh Hop season will be fantastic, and it's kind of a nice thing. Fresh Hop season now is most likely going to be a little bit more, hopefully a smaller footprint, as far as breweries making fresh hop beers outside the Northwest or outside hop growing regions. It certainly is a growing category of beer, but I don't necessarily think it should be a growing category of beer. And kind of those are my feelings on fresh hops. Lastly, there's a few styles, and then a few different types of hop varieties that we're looking forward to this season for harvest. We've never brewed a wet hop beer with Chinook. It's one of my favorite hops. It's an OG hop that often kind of gets forgotten about, and I think it's still a fantastic IPA hop. One of my top fives. And then we'll be looking at a couple other we're hoping to do maybe 1 to 2 fresh hops with experimental varieties as well. 692 or 630. We almost did one of those the year before, but timing didn't work out. And so, yeah, I think a lot of us brewers are really looking forward to harvest. And that's at least one thing we can look forward to while we, can't really go anywhere at this time. All right, I'm going back. Oh my God, I'm just making everyone cry with all these with being real. I'm just being real. When are you planning on starting your cool ship program? No cool ship program. We will be doing at Ballard. We'll be doing some wild ales. So just mostly with Brett C. And there'll be Brett specific hop forward beers that we can kind of age for 4 to 6 to 8 months and kind of see how those go. We'll also have a fruiting tank over there too, so we'll be able to kind of piggyback on some of our other brewery friends' fruit connections and do some fruited Brett beers, but it'll be all stainless, so no oak. So that's kind of the secret of the Ballard spot, is that we'll be doing all stainless wild ales in the back as well. So no cool shit, but you'll get some funk from us eventually. We miss playing around with Brett quite a bit, and so that's kind of part of the secret Ballard I guess ulterior motives of Ballard was the space for us to play around with Brett. All right, sorry, just scrolling through these comments. Any favorite collaborations, either breweries or styles of beers? Man, I mean, we've had to cancel a few collaborations since this thing started, which was a bummer. We love collaborating on styles that people don't expect from us. So, for example, like the Outer Range Belgian style stout. We brewed this beer because we both love Belgian style ales. We both have a history with them. We don't get to brew them as much. I think Outer Range was super cool, knowing that there wasn't going to be a line out the door for a Belgian style stout. And still we're super enthusiastic about brewing that. So little collaborations like that, kind of just styles that get us out of our comfort zone a little bit. That's kind of our favorite type of collaboration. I mean, that said, we brew a lot of IPAs with a lot of IPA brewers all over the country. And every single time we do that, we end up learning something new, whether it's a technique, a process, a philosophy, and it's certainly enlightening to kind of share your IPA process with your friends. Cool shit program. Any chance Market Fresh Bruce? Bruce, I don't know if we're going to bring Market Fresh Saison back in the foreseeable future, but I think maybe what this Brett program at Schulschul will do is allow us to get back to making similar type beers, but the Market Fresh Saison kind of like series ran its course. But you'll see some similar-ish things, a little bit more funky, hopefully in 2021. All right, let's see. Not a beer related, but what is that cool looking art behind you? Mark, it's a so the art behind me, I'm in our little like hybrid office guest room in my house. The art behind me is by the same artist that did the Happy Little Clouds can label, his name is John Stitch. He was my best friend from college's roommate down in Oakland at like an artist commune a decade ago or so, and I loved his work because he kind of seemed like this I don't know, like a Norman Rockwell on acid type figure. He's an illustrator. He's been published for like a lot of like magazine covers and things like that. But he's just a little more edgy and silly. So the painting behind me is like it's a photo of this RV that's on fire in like a motel pool with people just kind of hanging out, not acknowledging the bus on fire. And so it's kind of appropriate for what's going on right now in the world. Come to think of it, though, we've had the painting here since we moved in here in 2012 or so. All right, that's art talk. What else you guys have going on right now? I guess another thing that we can kind of start talking about. Let's see. I saw someone mentioned. Well, let me scroll back down here. People kind of stumbling into our place. P&A, no summer beer taste. That's a bummer too. Last beer before you die, go. Oh, Aaron, you're so good at just plugging me with these questions. Allagash White is my last beer before I die, for sure. Any chance of can design showing up on t-shirts? Maybe, Bruce. We have the Happy Little Clouds on a small run of shirts that we don't sell. That was kind of part of the art agreement with the artist beforehand. But yeah, maybe with Corinne's like artwork, we thought she nailed it. Corinne McNeely did our IPA label. She's also working on a third label for us that is going to basically encompass everything else. So it's just going to be called Random Small Batch Label, so that we can put a DIPA in a can fairly easily, or we can put a lager, one-off lager in a can as well. And I know her from Elysian. She was the graphic designer at Elysian when I was brewing there. I think she still does some freelance work for Elysian, but she's based in Wisconsin right now. And she's super talented. I don't know how many other beer labels she's done, but she comes highly recommended. So yes. Bruce loves the new can design. Yeah, we thought the nice thing about the new can design too is like having a relationship with somebody and an artist that you've known for, well over 10 years. You can kind of explain what you want, and she knows us well enough. She knows me well enough that she kind of can encompass that personality in a label that we thought was pretty awesome. It's certainly an advantage to having your friends do your labels. Where does the inspiration for your magical social media posts come from? The artwork, the copy, the hashtags, so good. Oh, thank you so much. It's really very slapdash. It's not like we put a lot of thought into it. There's still only really 4 of us full time at the brewery, and so social media to us was never a focus, but we always thought it should be genuine and transparent and, be silly and goofy. I think a lot of people take marketing too seriously, especially these days. That's just kind of our philosophy. We have friends that have fantastic, beautiful labels and marketing and branding. That's just not the Cloudburst way. So we kind of do everything DIY, and that includes social media. So we have a free Photoshop app that does the job with doing horrible Photoshop to our photos. And writing copy is kind of just a fun little break from doing all the other things that you do in the brewery. So just posts and copy and silly ideas and names are certainly the things that are super enjoyable, and the things that we'd never give up at the brewery. We got, how do you get an IPA to be a triple IPA? That's a real question, Kristen. IPA to triple IPA. How do you do that? You just take your recipe and you just times 3 and you say, hey, it's a triple IPA. Have you ever used or tried beer with crystal hops for bittering aromas, growing some of my own? I love crystal hops. They're really pleasant, kind of citrusy and herbaceous, another like old school C hop. A lot of crystal hops kind of made their way into ESBs and pales and IPAs like in the mid 90s. I think that they're going to be kind of coming back. I think a lot of these like old school, mellow, pretty pleasant, balanced hops, I hope start to kind of come back as people realize that you don't have to, have an overpowering, hop character in everything you do. I think balance has always been important to us, and crystal hops is an example of just a really beautifully balanced, subtle hop. And I think subtlety is something that I hope more craft beer drinkers appreciate as their palate evolves. I think palates, in general, people kind of start to just go towards full flavored things because those are easily to recognize, and those then are also easy to, I don't know, pick out and articulate per se. And then once you kind of figure out like what the biggest, boldest flavors are, you can kind of pare your palate down and work towards things that are, start searching for like new flavors, different flavors, less flavors, and kind of see how like the harmony works and things like that. So that's what I feel like. I like crystal hops for sure. I think we've talked about crystal hops with a brewery in town, Floodland. We were thinking about doing a collab this year, a wet hop crystal collab over at Floodland. So we might end up getting those into a beer, so we can kind of try that out. So yeah, let's see what else we got over here. Some Space is delicious. She really did the cosmic dust. Who did that? Some Space, though, just so you know, Some Space is not Some Space is not like a Space Dust recipe, nor is it like a Cosmic Lost recipe. It's a hazy dippo that has space in the name, but there's not a lot of similarities to it. But we have had people reach out and say, "Is Some Space like an Imperial Space Dust?" And it is not. Wes Saunders asks, what has been your biggest surprise since starting Cloudburst besides pandemic pivot to cans? Man, what has been the biggest surprise? That's a really hard question. I think the biggest surprise before pandemic, so BP, our biggest surprise was that we could still operate the brewery on our terms in a simple type of business model. It was almost at this point, 4.5 years of doing draft only beer, to 99% of it was sold in Seattle city limits. We try to run a simple operation because there's not very many of us, but a lot of people kind of think that inevitably you're going to have to grow to be bigger than you are. Put beer in more packages, get your beer out farther away from your house. And so that, I guess, to me is the biggest surprise, is that we were able to stick to our guns for so long before all this happened. And so, yeah, that's a great question. I think I could think about that a little bit longer too and kind of come up with some more surprises. But we're still super surprised at how well received we are. In our hometown. It's really wonderful, and we're super grateful with how our local community really supports us and our beer and gets behind what we stand for as far as being a small independent craft brewery. Kristen, I wants me to talk about the James Beard Foundation. I don't really like talking about our accomplishments. I think that's James Beard Foundation. It's a lifetime achievement that we were so incredibly honored to even be thought about. But I also don't like talking really about like medals and things we win. I think that's kind of what the medals and the things we win are for. Those things kind of do the talking for us. And once we kind of get these cool honors or make a beer that, wins a medal, we're super stoked on that. But we also don't really like to kind of keep talking about, the things that are great accomplishments, because, those are then forgotten the next week. And we need to kind of keep on pushing ourselves to accomplish even more things. All right. Well, I think you are winding down with all these questions. I don't even know what time it is because I can't really look on my phone. Have the Seahawks drafted anybody yet? Oops. Sorry, I went black there. All right, yeah, so if anybody else is kind of hanging around, feel free to shoot me another question, or I'm going to just kind of like leave you guys back into your Facebook, Facebook worlds. This is still really weird talking to a phone to nobody. I'm kind of uncomfortable doing it. But you made it less awkward. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy your weekend. Cloudburst Tasting Room, we're open 9 to 6 every day, selling plenty of beer to go. Someone's recording. But yeah, anyways, it's like texting with Noah, Lance. I know. Tell me about it. All right, thanks everybody. Cheers, good seeing you, and enjoy the weekend.